So once again, for those of you who are joining us, once again, welcome. Thank you so much, and we are looking forward to an exciting day today. And our first panel really gave us some points to think about, and I'm sure you have a lot of takeaways from our last panel. And for the next session, we have our fireside chat, and as we can see, is joining me on stage. Can we have a round of applause for Mr. Ken Mandel from the Regional Managing Director of GrabAds and Brand Insights, and also the President Director of Unilever Indonesia and Chairman of Advisory Board of MMA Global Indonesia, Ibu Ira Noviarti. The floor is yours. Can we have a round of applause once again?
Hello. Good morning. Almost afternoon, but I'm very pleased and honored to be here with Ira. We're going to try and bring some balance to this conversation. AI is absolutely amazing, but we also believe that there's some gut instinct that's also important. So all the humans in the room, this is for you. So Ira, thank you so much for joining.
Oh, thank you. It's a pleasure to be here.
I want to start off with an interesting question. If you weren't doing what you're doing today in your current career, what do you think you would have actually done in life if it wasn't being the CEO of one of the largest FMCGs in the world?
If I'm not actually the CEO, not necessarily the largest, maybe in Indonesia, but then I'll be an interior designer.
Wow.
And a fashion designer. And I will try to combine the two with the AI.
Is that any hint about what you might do next, or you know?
Yeah, I think on the serious note, I mean, it's I think I've actually been in the company for 28 years, and with Indonesia alone, it's around 24 years.
Wow.
So it's a long time, and I'm sure that majority of you is actually always, you wonder maybe on the trending topics, where is she going? Where is she going? But, Unilever has actually been the company where it's actually really fit with my purpose. When you are, it's like finding your life partner, right? When you're actually finding the right life partner, it's a fleeting time. You suddenly, it's already been 28 years. So I'm actually excited to see the great possibilities that it actually open up in front of me.
Well, we definitely will be watching and excited for what comes next. Okay, I want to jump into the topic of today. We're talking about building the next billion-dollar brand. But my first question is really about, is data by itself enough to build the next billion-dollar brand? I mean, what other ingredients do you need to really build that brand? So, are we focusing too much on data? And do we need some balance? And what are your thoughts on that topic?
Yeah, I think this is the topics that is very close to my heart, right, Ken? Obviously, data is an integral part of how we actually do marketing, Why I'm actually saying the integral part of how we actually do marketing is because the data, when you actually see the data, let's take the example, right? We are doing the habit and attitude study. The habit and attitude study is the data that we collect from the thousands of numbers of the consumers I'll just give you an example, in Indonesia. Basically, the habit and attitude study is actually, we want to see the behavior of the consumers. What time do they wake up? What do they do when they wake up? What do they, I think, how did they actually, what is the amount of the shampoo that he's actually using? And what do they do after that? How many times does the C spend in the bathroom? All of that is actually data, right? And I think now, more and more, we actually get more of a robust data when we actually do such study with the consumers. But really, that itself is the base for us. It's an integral part, but I think the most important is the way we extract that data. Because, with just one of the example, with a habit and attitude study, we have like this thick of the data. Now, it requires a human being. It requires, of course, from that study, you can actually, the AI itself will suggest you, what's come out, what is the essence of that. But what is critical is for you to decode that data with your experience, with your intuitions, and you would actually point it out, oh, this is actually probably the particular things that I would like to dive in more. Because, with your experience, with your, you try to connect with other data, probably you said, okay, this is interesting, I want to go dive into that. So that is actually one. The other things, beside data, you have to be able to also immerse yourself in the life of the consumers. Because, see, if you see the data, let's say, for example, I would give the example of the woman in Indonesia, majority is actually wearing hijabs, right? So if 10 years ago, 40% of the women is wearing hijab, now it's 90% of the women in Indonesia is actually wearing hijabs. Now, if you look into that data, and then what's come out from the habit and attitude is that, oh, the woman is actually using less of the shampoo, not washing less in a week. But that's it. That's what tells you. It doesn't really tell you why, right? Why she's actually washing her hair less. Only by observing what is she doing in the morning, what troubles her, that it makes her actually doesn't want to actually wash any other day, is because when she wash, it takes a long time for her to actually put on the scarf. And then when he put on the scarf on her head, when the shampoo itself is actually make her hair smooth, it's make it difficult for her to use the scarf. So you see, you will not actually pick that up from the data of habit and attitude. You will pick that up when you are actually seeing and observing and talking to her. And that is actually the beauty of actually combining between data and also the observations and also immersion and intuitions. So that's what I can actually share with you, the experience that we had. So that's why it is very important for the organizations, for the company, especially this, I would assume that majority are actually coming from the company where the marketing is actually at the heart of the business, is to really ask the people to go out there. Don't only look into the data, but go out there and immerse yourself with the consumers. Watch what she's actually doing. Because you know what? I give you one of the examples of what we did actually in detergents. I think detergent is actually one of our huge business in Unilever Indonesia. Watching her from the start, she's actually putting the clothes, whether she put the clothes first or the water first, whether she actually leave the clothes and then take care of her kids, is going to lead you into very different product formulations, right? Because, when you put on the clothes and then put the water, versus you put the water first and then clothes, is actually, you require a different kind of formulations. So that observations beside data is actually very key.
Yeah, that's fascinating. I have another question for you, but I actually going to ask the audience. I think we need to activate them a bit more. Can you put up your hand first if you think marketing is more about science or is it more about art? So if it's more about science, put up your hand. Okay, one person. Is it more about art? More people. What about all of you who didn't put up your hand? Okay, I just want to wake them up a bit, and I don't want to make you do all the work, so just, because that's really about the crux of this. Okay, my next question is hard. I'm warning you in advance. I want you to talk about failure. An example where Unilever had a failure that was unexpected.
Yeah. So one of the biggest mistake that we did, not the biggest actually, one of the mistake that we did was that, and I'll give you the example. I'm actually going to be very open to you. We're looking into the evolutions of the consumers in Indonesia, where, again, I'm actually coming back into women wearing hijabs, right? 40% 10 years ago, 90% now. And when I joined back Unilever after I finished my assignment in Food Solutions, Southeast Asia, at that time, the task given to me is that our portfolio have a gap. We have a gap in our portfolio, and that's why I think in that 2017, when I was actually asked to come back, for the first time, the beauty and personal care business in Indonesia, which is half of the company, is actually experiencing a negative growth. So Alan Job at that time asked me, come back to Indonesia, although I told him that, it takes 20 years for me to go out from Indonesia. Now, only after 3 years, I have to come back to Indonesia, but then the task is the task, right? So I came back to Indonesia and I saw I see why the business is actually having the negative growth. One of the reasons is because of the portfolio. We have a gap in the portfolio in our brand. Why? Because somehow the consumers has moved the evolutions. We are not actually progressing with the evolutions of the consumers. So, like for example, before, soft, smooth hair is number one need in the hair care. Number one. After only 5 years, that number one becoming number 6. The one that is really driving the need of the consumers in Indonesia becoming anti-dandruff and hair fall, which is used to be number 3 or number 4. And our portfolio still sits in that segment. How disconnect, how we are. And again, another example is that our body lotions are actually really talking more about making skin fairer, sun protection, and all of that. But again, that is not what is expected by the consumers that is actually wearing a hijab. When you are covering yourself, lighter skin is actually not the key dimension that they're looking for, right? So that is, again, I want to give you the example of why the portfolio is actually a gap. So, okay, then I came and then I see some of the project that is actually half through. And at that time, we said we need to come. So all the data is actually suggesting into one thing. We need to come with a new brand because our existing brand didn't actually really capture and address the need of the Muslim consumers. Okay? So, okay. And another data saying that Chitra was not actually able to capture the need in the low-income consumers. So the output of that, having actually discussed and everything, we come with a product called Hijab Fresh. And I'm actually came, and it's already halfway in, and we look into all the data and said, okay, I think this is actually really the right things to do. We need to come with a new brand, play in the lower end, called Hijab Fresh, and sell it to the Indonesian consumers. And I'm sure that this is actually, and again, with the proposition that is actually tuning into the certain lifestyle of the Muslim consumers. It failed successfully. It failed successfully because of the reason that I actually shared before. You miss combining your intuitions, your understanding and observing, immersing yourself with the consumers, and you are basically relying too much on the data. So first of all, Hijab Fresh for body lotion that itself, there is a bit of a disconnect, right? Because hijabs, obviously, people will relate into the hair care. So that's one thing. That is actually quite basic. But again, all the data says that the mix is robust, the mix is very good, all green. But something that is really in front of us, we didn't actually manage to pick that up. Second, somehow the packaging, the bottle and everything, it doesn't really portray the body lotions, but it's actually portrayed more of the shampoo. So there is a certain decode that we learn, usually the marketing learn this skill, right, over time. But again, all the data of the test, we tested amongst thousands of the consumers, say that it's good, it's green, it's good to go. So I think this is actually quite a big lesson from us, for us, you know. When we see, when somehow the data is actually making you say, I think this is good to go. Thousands of people is actually saying is a yes. But obviously, we are actually ignoring our intuitions, we're ignoring the experience and the, what we call years of observations to say there's something wrong here. So it failed successfully, and we have to delist it from the market, and we learn from that, and yeah, it's a big lesson learned.
You know, thank you for sharing that. That's very brave to talk about not just success, but failure, because we learn from our failures. And I think the insight there for me is that maybe the AI for humans is our gut. So we can be presented with all this amazing data, but ultimately the human has to make the call with their gut, which is the right data to pursue in the execution. Because you can get paralyzed by data as well. Okay, I want to give you an opportunity now to talk about a successful campaign. We don't want to just talk about failures. Where is an example perhaps, or share an example where you believe you got the mix right between the data insights, the creativity, and everything that added up to these great ingredients that made a campaign very successful and a brand very successful?
One of the brand that I would like to share with you, that could probably be the learning for you guys, but I'm, again, not unfortunately, but the example that I'm going to use here is a local brand, Bango. Yeah, Bango is actually our big brand, big brand, and in fact, this is actually one of the top 10 already global brand in the nutrition business of Unilever. And it's actually been growing by more than, it's actually like double digit every year. So let me actually tell you what is actually really the recipe for that, right? So we are looking into the data. Again, we're looking into what are the top dishes that Indonesian consumers is actually loving, right? What are the behavior of the people when it comes into the top dishes? I'm sure that can, I don't know, what is your favorite food? Indonesian food.
My favorite Indonesian food would be probably satay and gado-gado.
Satay and gado-gado.
Yeah.
I think that is actually part of the top 10 of the Indonesian food. Nasi goreng is actually one of the top dishes in Indonesia. Semur is also one of the top dishes in Indonesia. So we have a robust data of what are the top dishes that young mother is actually liking, old mother is actually liking, the newlywed wife, the newlywed couples that is actually loving. So we have all of that data basically, right? And we want to, and also what is actually the type of the sugar level that they love, region by region, in fact, area by area. We have all of, now with the data that is actually very easy to actually be get, we can actually even have more sophisticated data from that. So what we did is actually we married that data and we observe the consumers weeks after weeks after weeks. How does she use it? How does she cook, right? In fact, we watch her cooking, you will watch carefully whether when she's cooking like this, she will actually use her hand, her left hand, right? Sorry. To cook. That itself is giving you data, right? That itself is giving you data when you're watching her. Because you want, when she's busy doing this, and she might actually be, think about it, carry her daughter dengan kain gitu loh, with a scarf probably, when she's actually cooking. So, convenience for her, it's super important. How's the shape of the bottle would be very important for her, because she needs to do all of that multitasking, isn't it? And the versatility that she actually really need when she requires a soy sauce is actually very different region by region. So just watching her cooking, that itself is actually giving you one very important observations. I'm just actually sharing with you also probably a parallel example. Yeah, parallel example when I had a experience in the food solution Southeast Asia. It's one of the successful performing region for 3 years at that time, and becoming one of the world benchmark in terms of the business. We really watch hours after hours the chef, but we got the data, we got the panel data and everything. And combining that, how the chef is actually like, even when the chef is actually having 2 square meters space versus the chef that is actually have large space, you will see a different behavior. You will see a different preference. So the same as you're actually talking about the mothers. So when we look into that and we match with the preference of the regions, you will actually be able to come out with a campaign that is successful. And that's what's actually been fueling the brand years after years after years after years. But one thing for sure, not necessarily the same formula that you did 4 years ago are going to be successful and working today. Not necessarily. The same formula, because the environment different, the preference is actually changing, but somehow what doesn't change is that when you marry data with the immense observations of the consumer's behavior, I would guarantee you that will actually lead into a success.
Yeah. I mean, you know, it's amazing because the time goes by so quickly and we have so much more questions, but one of the favorite examples I have that we did together with Unilever was for Knorr, where we really saw this insight that, especially during the pandemic, people were struggling to figure out what to make for dinner every single night. And we had a partnership with you where we said, you know what, why show an ad? Why don't we show recipe cards? Because Knorr being an ingredient brand. And so what you're saying reminds me of that example where you could look through recipes as a consumer, and that's really like brand utility, brand as a service, which I think is a real concept. And then you could choose like nasi lemak or whatever you want to make, and then that was auto-populated into GrabMart, and then you just push the button, and then you get all the ingredients. And really, I think that insight came from collaboration together with your teams, and it really is important that you marry data with some sort of spark of creativity to have success.
Absolutely. So we have, just to touch upon that, we have it called digital hub, in our company, the digital hub. But then when you see digital hub, in your mind it's like, oh, data, 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 It's not. The hub is basically, it's the place where marketing, consumer market insight, the media people, the people who's actually working on our innovation is actually sit together. And in that room, they will actually show many data points. they will, and you can actually name it, it can actually be thousands of data points. But I think the most important thing is that how is that group are decoding the data? Because as I said, it's very important. You need to also enable your company or organizations to be able to get that data, because that is integral part of the, of your hypothesis. But how is that group actually sit together to translate what is actually come up from that data into insight? What is the underlying insight that is actually coming out from there? But it doesn't stop there. After you are coming with the underlying insight, you got to go back to the consumers and observe and test your hypothesis. Is my hypothesis correct? Is she doing what we thought we were actually doing? Is that actually going to be translated into big opportunity? So I think that is actually the cycle you have to keep on doing to make sure that you don't actually disconnect yourself with what is actually expected by large numbers of consumers.
Okay, maybe one final question and then we'll ignore the doorbell. Someone's knocking at the door, but we're not interested in letting them in. So final question. What trends are you seeing in FMCG? I mean, we heard from Rohit this morning about Kroger, obviously a very strong retail media network push to connect advertising to sales. So what trends are you seeing around retail media network, or anything you'd like to share with the audience as a final bit of wisdom? You've given us so much wisdom today. What last nugget would you like to share?
There are many trends which I don't want to actually talk about. There will be another 25, 30 minutes to talk about it. But there are two big trends that I think everyone here needs to actually look into. Yeah. And there's no rocket science behind that trend, because that trend is true not only outside Indonesia, but really true inside Indonesia. First trend is basically smart spending. Yeah, smart spending. Consumers is actually becoming more and more smart in doing the coping mechanism. They have much more information that they had 5, 10 years ago. They can actually have multi-informations, what's in it for me, and have easily find the substitute of what does she actually need. And again, smartly, because her income is not necessarily higher, right? She would actually adjust the spending on this part in order for her to satisfy her desire for that part, for the other part. So I think understanding what smart spending means in your category and in your business is actually very, very critical, because the smart spending, if I translate that into shampoo, is very different than if I translate that into travel, right? Or let's say food, right? So I think that's you need to actually be able to decode that trend for your portfolio. I think that's one. The second is actually really the rising of what I call the premium, what we call premiumizations, right? And I think for us, we are actually very serious in really unlocking the potentials of the premium segment. People is actually wanting luxury, but they don't want to pay for the luxury. They desire for luxury. I desire, for example, La Mer brand, right? Which is costs us millions product. But they don't want to actually pay that much. But the trend of actually having something that is luxurious for them is actually there. And hence, coming what we call mastis. Mastis is actually the bridge between mass and prestige. And what does that mean for your business? What does that mean for your portfolio? You need to actually figure it out. But that trend will be there for the next 5, 6, 7 years.
Thank you, Ira, for sharing all your wisdom, and thank you for joining the session very much.
Thank you. It's a pleasure.
Thank you very much, Baba Ken. And Ibu Ira, we'd like to take the time to take an official photo of our speakers. And thank you so much for the talk today.